Hear me. All
Hi.
right, so we're live. Josh?
Yes, yes. We have Silvio Pupo here, our mascot from Miami. Now I'm just messing around. He's a great guy from Miami, the founder of Logos Capital. He's done a lot of work in social impact, but I'll let him tell you about himself, and I'll get up off this. So you can get started, Silvio.
All right, thank you so much for having me here today, Josh. Really appreciate it and really appreciate all the great work and the ideas of what's happening to culminate Hack for Justice. As you know, we're living a very critical moment right now in time, in both throughout most modern history, particularly now. We're at a major inflection point of multiple things intercrossing and intersecting in history, and part of it is this conversation of race that's been really that's burned up entirely all of social media and a lot of what's happening around the world. At the both that's impacted with Black Lives Matter in the U.S., but also we're now seeing this same thing starting to even influence things that are happening in Africa. And so what's interesting from my point of view, by the way, my name's Silvio. Just to introduce myself really quick for the audience, people that might not know me. I'm from Miami, born and raised in Miami. I'm an inner city kid. I went to predominantly black schools growing up. I'm passionate about education. I'm still an educator. I was part of Future Teachers of America in third grade. I continued teaching. I started mainly in martial arts, and that's still what I'm most actively teaching in, as well as other things like blockchain technology and finance. People that work and work with me and are part of our internship program at Logos Capital. Logos Capital is an impact investment bank that I started about 9 years ago to commercialize and build new businesses that are inclusive and circular by design from the very outset. And so it's a little bit about me. I'm on different boards in different organizations, for-profit, non-profit, philanthropy, and government, which I can get into. A lot of it is online. Some of it is like the Masters of University of Miami's Masters in Sustainable Business program is my newest appointment. The Mayor's International Council for City of Miami, where I'm an ambassador to the City of Miami and in charge of building sister city relationships with other cities around the world. I liaison with South Africa and Cape Town as one of the smart cities that are sister city cities we work very actively with because of also their 100 Resilient Cities initiative. If you guys are not aware of that, 100 Resilient Cities is something worth checking out, especially and there are things like gentrification, climate gentrification, where we're exposed to here in Miami, which are affecting neighborhoods like Little Haiti, very important community, the Haitian community for me. The other sister city is Port-au-Prince, which I've been liaisoning with, particularly after the earthquakes and hurricanes that happen. So I'm an emergency responder that activates for social and environmental hazards. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. So I'm a finance guy, very involved in the community, and sit on a couple of other boards and investment committees. So the conversation of let's put our money where our mouth is, I think is one of the first things that I'd like to highlight. And then I want to just really touch into this topic, but I think it's so important to contextualize this conversation with who I am and why this matters to me. Reverse racism, for people that might read the title and not understand this contextualization, might miss the entire point because of reverse racism. But I think it's important to understand someone that's always tried to see a third party point of view, a third party perspective, and how to make sure that, and we were listening to empowerment in our conversations earlier. For example, Jalen was talking a little bit about this. And even in the judicial system and in the court system, you also need to come from a position of authority, from a position of a higher ground if you can. And I want to contextualize today's conversation around that, right? Around approaching the issue of race from an empowerment point of view, right? I mean, because from a historical point of view, right, we've always been put down as minority communities. I experienced racism growing up for being white, going to a predominantly black school, and I was always really shocked even to see my black friends getting bullied for being black. My African friends got bullied by the African American kids, and the African American kids bullied each other based on who was more black or who was more red, or if you were white. So it's like there was this whole, there was Black at Cracker Day at my school where it's like, if you were white and you went to school, you were going to get beat up. And it was just like, that was like the thing that happened at Alapata Middle School. Right. So, and seeing these things, I'm giving you both sides of the spectrum, right? I'm not saying, oh, because I was white, I was getting bullied. I'm Latino. I got bullied for being Latino, but I didn't know this until I left Gainesville, outside of Miami, where minorities are the majority. So it's my perspective is very very skewed as well. So I do want to frame that, right? But the black community, I felt, growing up, and this issue of reverse racism boils down into these two things, right? Racism that I've experienced within the black community, not just for me being white, but blacks against blacks. So families that are more well-to-do, that have been longer established, and that have come from more wealth, will close themselves off from other black people in the U.S. that they feel that they're just, that are not as educated, for example. And education is a big a line that's put to show classism, and that's really the point of today's conversation, is that be able to have conversations with kings and not feel shy about it, but to be able to walk with everybody from all walks of life, especially the people that need us the most and need these conversations the most, and are the most marginalized communities. Same thing with Native Americans. Right? I mean, we just had Thanksgiving this past week, and it's one of the most abused. This story. I mean, a lot of Native Americans still don't have water and electricity. Think about that, right? A lot of Native Americans don't have water and electricity, and that's here in the U.S. So I wanted to just frame the paradigm. We're investing in things for social justice, particularly criminal reform. I care a lot about. We're experiencing and seeing like all the abuse that there is in the system today. So we need to reformat everything. Systems change. And what Logos Capital was established to do was to look at, okay, how can we invest and influence things at a systematic level? And racism is this. And the best way, I think, for us to overcome and this topic of particularly reverse racism creep, I had in mind, for example, white police officers, right? And to best show the example of this reverse racism creep, and something that I think all of us should do at a systematic level, which starts at an individual level, right? And a lot of these points are, what can we do? Because if one person messes up in our community, right, it reflects bad on everybody else, right? And that's kind of where we are today. And because of that, we need to be extra courteous to police officers. We need to be extra courteous, to your standard, white people that are racist. And let's be courteous. Let's not get feelings of hate, right? Like what I experienced growing up with people that didn't know me, beating me up because of the color of my skin. I was like, people, you don't know me, like I have love in my heart for everybody. And so we need to be the same. Right. I mean, and lead by example and show love and prevent this reverse racism, which is the opposite side. OK, we're saying Black Lives Matter. The Black community especially needs to self-patrol to make sure that we're not out dissing cops. Right. Like I'm seeing a lot of videos online of like people pressuring cops and talking smack to the cop and recording the thing to try to trigger the cop. That's not what we need to be doing. Right. That's not the conversation that should be happening. And this is, ultimately, if you look at things on a long enough timeline and the Black community becomes very successful, business-wise, right? That's multi-generational wealth creation is the way that we need to move this conversation forward, is how do we build businesses and multi-generational wealth, and how do we remain inclusive of people that are outside of our culture, outside of our community, right? And to prevent any kind of discrimination and racial injustice, right? At all. If I hear, if I see, a Black person bullying a white person, which I know sounds crazy, but it's like what I grew up experiencing, be like, hey, it's not okay, right? We need to step out and self police and be like, we wouldn't need police officers to be self police, right? And that's kind of what I think is really important is this leading by example in our communities, building businesses, being speaking right, speaking up, speaking thoughtfully, doing things thoughtfully and aware, because once then that will make everybody look good, right? I want Josh to look good. I want Josh to act well. I want Josh to be perceived well, because that reflects well on everybody in Josh's community, myself included. And so this is really what I wanted to get at with reverse racism is let's avoid teetering into triggering fear in white people or cops, because there's a like nationwide resentment, right? Let's turn that energy into wisdom of love and of appreciation to show, hey, you know what? We need to be better than that. We need to show that we are not that way. We need to lead by example in these conversations, all around race, and to prevent any kind of it, joking around or not, that it's not okay to judge people on base of merit of race. It should be things should be based on merit, and everybody needs support, and we need to think about the systems change that can make sure that we don't have poverty and extreme poverty in places like the U.S. or anywhere in the world for that matter, and use our resources instead of focusing on military and hostility toward that love and appreciation, which is going to build and grow the economy more anyway, by just building more homes and building better homes and building better communities. And you'll have more sustainable economics because you have a stronger base of users and business people and wealth that's created. And that's really where we should be investing into, and kind of what I wanted to just share today, for today's, just what I wanted to convey, my message around this. I did make a short video during the protests in Miami, by the way, which I'm going to have put up on iMovie. I know that this is all about visuals and images and thoughts and communication for stopping hate. And I think that if I could draw a visual, it's about love, right? Draw visuals of flowers, right? There was a protest that happened in the Middle East. I think it was, or Eastern Europe. I think it was Eastern Europe. Recently, a few months ago, and it was led by the women. I think it's Serbia. I think it might have been Serbia, and it was led by the women. And the women went out with these flowers to convey their message and communicate their point. And they gave all the officers everywhere flowers. This like army of women. And when we're thinking about power, and we're thinking about justice, and we're thinking about racism, and we're thinking about changing the narrative, we need to start by doing something like that, right? Just something so beautiful that it sort of, helps people realize, why we're all one, and we all need to be worried about everybody else's problems, because it's false to think that we're disconnected from others, economically, socially, culturally, especially today, not even to mention in the internet. So, Josh, I'll invite you to join me and comment on this, because I know that you and I have, this is just more or less a conversation that you and I would normally have in my backyard anyway, when we're working together, through the week and talking about some stuff. And I know that, there are several others. So I think that's my main stuff, my main point.
No, definitely. I think, with this conversation right now, there's a lot of issues and opportunities that relate to people being victims of circumstance and their environment. There's a famous album by Jim Jones, a hip hop artist named Jim Jones of Dipset, called Hustlers, POME. And what he means by POME is product of my environment. And if you listen to hip hop narrates a lot of the struggles of African American minorities and people of color to the world. And it's very abstract in the sense that you have to it's kind of like art. You have to kind of like understand it, or you have to like investigate and be curious about it to really understand what they're narrating. It's not just about drugs, guns, and violence, but it's about the fact that the environments that they grew up in created this, psychological issue. And then that creates a repetitive behavior when you think about generationally, every generation is going through the same, ramifications of drugs, gun, and violence, right? So when you
Right.
have these things in an ecosystem, and 5 generations went through the same experiences, how do you reverse that? Well, that's the problem. You may not be able to reverse that. You may have to actually start with a fresh way of thinking and start on a generational scale where instead of drugs, gun, and violence, you start with books, degrees, and fair wages, right? You may start with businesses, community, and religion. You can put whatever trifecta you want on it. The point I'm making is that in in the minority communities, we either are disenfranchised through education or business ownership. They're the two most
Right.
critical ways to create wealth. So either you have people that get out of the hood through education, or they get out of the hood because of business. They became a rapper, they became an entertainer, which made them a brand, which gave them a business, right? Or they became a small business owner, a tradesman, a barbershop owner, whatever, independent contractor. So there's a number of ways to collectively add value, and I think I'm really excited to see how we'll be able to curate more opportunity for people as things evolve. So I'm going to end this session now, and we can get going into the next session in about 9 minutes. We'll have Dr. Conway Gibson, talking about sustainability. Thank you, Silvio, for joining us and sharing this insight.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.